panelists here with you today to talk about problems involving access to justice. As you've already gotten the sense from some of our earlier presentations, it's a large problem. My primary area of specialization, for example, is family law. There are many jurisdictions in the United States where as many of 90% of couples who obtain a divorce do so with no more than one lawyer. What does that one lawyer do? That lawyer, if they have one, and many of these couples are completely pro se, no lawyers at all, can only reduce the agreement that these couples have already reached to legal form. Increasingly, of course, those couples are not hiring that scrivener. They're going to something like LegalZoom to produce the document and thus getting no legal advice at all. What can legal innovation and technology do for divorcing couples, for people who have some kind of low-level dispute, the wide range of legal problems where people are not getting access to the legal community? That's what our panelists are going to talk to us about today, and we're going to start with Mark.
Great. I'm just going to make sure I can use the clicker.
Right click forward, left, don't touch that button. This is right. This is moving forward.
Okay. And how do I get it onto the?
I'll put it up for you.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Marsha and Jonathan and everyone here at Brooklyn Law School for actually including access to justice on the schedule today. I don't know, some of you may have, like me, gone to the reInvent Law Day recently at Cooper Union, and I was stunned at, I think there was one presenter during the entire day. They brought someone from the nonprofit sector, and I was really just stunned at how little consideration was given to the impact of these changing technologies on, you know, access to justice issues. So I was really pleased that this was on here. I was a little curious and disappointed that the only sort of elected official in the room walked out right before we started our panel. But I know that he had, conflicting obligations.
He'll watch the webcast.
Right, he will, I'm sure. So before talking about the technology, and I'm Mark O'Brien, I'm the co-founder and executive director of Pro Bono Net, which is a national nonprofit based here in New York, which over the last 15 years has developed and supported web-based systems that are used pretty broadly by the public interest legal community, courts, and other justice actors to give capacity to the public interest legal community to address the needs of low-income people and other vulnerable communities. And before, I will show some technology and some examples of things that we've done, but I wanted to start by kind of thinking a little bit about how we define the problem. And so I put up a quote that comes from the Open Society Foundation's website about the concept of legal empowerment. And when we're thinking about what it is that technology uniquely enables us to think about in our approaches to using, to better serving the needs of all in our communities, there are a number of things in that quote that really jumped out at me. And one was that sort of focusing around this notion of capacity, what the capacity of individuals, and a lot of Pro Bono Net's work, and what I'll try and talk about in a quick jump through some different initiatives, is how we've rooted the work that we do in both an understanding and appreciation of new and evolving technologies, but also about what is the capacity within the communities of legal organizations, non-legal organizations, and others that we are trying to deploy solutions to support their work. I love the idea of, you know, disintermediation and disruption, but I don't actually want to disempower the public interest legal sector in our work. And so we've looked for ways that will both provide tools to let people do the work in the ways they're doing now more effectively and efficiently, and also rethink how they define the opportunity. And one of the interesting thing, and the other thing that makes me put up this legal empowerment quote, is thinking about the fact that when we talk about access to justice, and we try and quantify it mostly here in the United States, at the end of the day, it usually comes down to what percentage of people have a lawyer. It seems to be the most compelling way to define what the access challenges are. You know, only 1 out of 9 people who qualify for federally funded legal services actually get a lawyer. But one of the things I think we need to ask ourselves is, should in fact we be defining justice as access to a lawyer? And it's an open question, the idea for me, and it's something I hope we can talk about, is how valid the concept of legal empowerment is. And I just put up another slide. This comes from, if folks are not familiar with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and their fantastic work that they're doing in many different ways to make consumer information and tools available to people, but also in using data to track complaints about financial institutions and hold them accountable in real time. Really remarkable work, and they have, in the financial context, they've come up with this notion of financial empowerment, which takes traditional activities that were directed towards financial education and financial literacy, and tried to define a space in which the combination of that education and literacy combined with tools that enable people to take actions would constitute financial empowerment. And I think it's sort of interesting to think about, both as lawyers and for those of us who aren't lawyers in the room, what the validity of that is in the legal context. So I'm going to now, I've wasted most of my time I promised to use, but I'm going to be really quick from here. So our work, just really quickly, and this is a part lead into Wilneida, as our name suggests, Pro Bono Net, we started in the sort of lawyer support area, and we have systems that there are 90,000 lawyers around the country use and access to get sort of knowledge systems to help them engage in public interest legal work. But increasingly, a lot of our work is consumer focused. So LawHelp.org is, we have 25 states around the country that operate consumer legal information platforms with the best of breed content from the public interest legal community here in New York. If you've never gone to it, LawHelpNY.org. Will is one of the people who works at LawHelp New York. It is both a place where information and people can find how to get access to legal services available, but also increasingly, it's kind of we think of it as a spine on which experimentation and really interesting new ways of delivering services, like if you look on the right-hand side there, that LawHelp is a service that's operated by law students here in New York State, available, I think, just about 5 or 6 days a week, all hours of the day, in English and Spanish. Think of it as like when you go to Land's End and you expect to have somebody chat with you, and they're not going to knit you a sweater out of chain mail if it's not in the catalog, but they are going to get you to what they have and help you find. And so that's been a strategy that's been used to try and make the websites and the information more accessible to a broader group of users. And the challenge is not the technology, which is trivial, but again, it's that question of capacity. If the public interest legal community wanted to offer this service, who would do it? What training would they need? How would you make sure that the service supported best practices in that area? And we support LawHelp initiatives in about 14 states that all use different models, some involving law students, some involving hotline staff, some involving attorneys who end up doing legal representation work that is initiated initially in Texas through those online chats. And then the other sort of really important tool, I'm just curious, how many people recognize this image here? So very small number, which is, it's not mine. This software, it's interview software that was developed out of Cali and the Center for Computer Assisted Legal Information and Education in Chicago Kent Law School is involved, developed A2J Author. And it is a interview gathering system that has been used in coordination with document assembly software. I think Pro Bono Net probably operates one of, if not the largest, online legal document. Last year, 1 million people used LawHelp Interactive. This year, more than 500,000 legal forms will be created by people. Some of those all of those forms created for them with contextual help and video and multilingual support for people. All of the content created by the public interest legal community, law schools, courts here in New York. The New York State courts use this system for their DIY forms, their do-it-yourself forms. And increasingly, while these self-help tools are really important, and clearly the Docracy folks have gotten onto something that way, they're also really important as providing a new capacity for the public interest legal community and their allies to think about setting up services that add value on top of these things. And so I'm going to jump into really quickly, and now I'll start talking quickly. Just a few last things that dig down into the immigration space, and I'll just jump through a few things. About 10 years ago, which was not coincidentally the last time that there was a sort of serious political discussion about comprehensive immigration reform. Pro Bono Net was originally incubated out of the Open Society Foundations here in New York. And one of our program officers there introduced us to some folks from the Catholic Legal Immigration Network. I didn't know in 2004 that the Catholic Church was the largest provider of nonprofit immigration legal services in the country through diocesan-based, as folks may know, in immigration, you don't have to be an attorney to practice. You can work at an organization which has been recognized by the BIA and then become accredited to actually represent people both in affirmative proceedings and also in court proceedings. And the Catholic Legal Immigration Network was trying to think about, well, we were really involved the last time there was a mass legalization. If 20% of the people that came through that legalization program in the 1980s, if we expect the same 20% today of the anywhere at that point between people were estimating 11 to 18 million people, how would we have the capacity to do that? And unlike in the 80s, when all of 90% of those people who were eligible for those programs were probably in 7 urban centers, now they're all over the country. And so we got together and we talked with them about, well, how would you support your network? And do you have all the capacity that you need? And could your one organization, if we were able to train and support your people, is that the way to approaching organization by organization or network by network capacity? Is that the way to think about solving an access problem? And to their credit, they said no. There's other folks that we would need their expertise, and there are other organizations that we'd need to be doing that work. And so we've engaged with them in pulling together a lot of the major national immigrants' rights organizations, and we used a really great, was written in the early 2000s, and it was a really fabulous report that Suzette Brooks-Masters, who's now at the J.M. Kaplan Fund and runs their immigration program, and Ted Perlmutter, who some of you may know, I think he's teaching up at Columbia now, did, that was looking at how the immigrants' rights sector was using technology for communications, service provision, and where the gaps were. And we brought people together and we said, let's update this report. And we had Suzette interview all the organizations that we're bringing together for convening, and we tried to identify where were the places that there were gaps in capacity, and what are those things that groups felt that they could solve the challenges on their own, and where would they be willing to give up their own individual control and do something as a group. And then out of that was the Immigration Advocates Network, and initially it was focused on training and support. And one of the first things it did was actually map capacity, got all the groups that were maintaining different directories to agree to put it all in one online system that would then be able to be used, and there are APIs for it that make this available for iPhone apps, for other websites to use, for SMS text messaging campaigns that organizations I've never even heard of use to refer people to how to find nonprofit immigration legal services providers. And in the initial lift for it, and one of the points here is, when Bill Clinton was running for re-election, and everybody in the Clinton campaign apparently said, every day, it's the economy, stupid. It's the economy, stupid. Every time I come to a technology conference, every time we're doing something at Pro Bono Net, we always have to remind ourselves, it's the content, stupid. It's not actually the technology. And actually, in the first period, it's the content, and after a while, we have to remind ourselves, oh, wait a second, it's not the content that's the most important thing, it's the network that's the most important thing. We've developed some really very cool apps and online systems like Citizenship Works, which is now used by immigration legal services providers all around the country, including a network of 28 centers here in New York, funded through the New York State Office for New Americans, to be opportunity centers to provide naturalization services. Most of them are organizations without native legal capacity. And they use a network of 4 ONA legal counsel that provide backup expertise to them. In this system, you can go to the Brooklyn Public Library every month, you can go to the Queens Public Library, and in programs that are being promoted not by legal organizations, but by the public library, see what happens when people come in and are able to engage in, the centerpiece amongst all the other things on this are one of those online interviews with the interactive forms that engages people and actually helps to, I only have like 3 minutes ago left. So now I'm really gonna get really quick. But I feel like it's important, a lot of this stuff I didn't do, my organization didn't do, but I think it's important for people in this room who look to the nonprofit sector as the place that maybe they would provide pro bono help to think about what are some of the really exciting and cutting edge things and ways that people are using technology. So in addition to, this is now being used to provide remote distance services that would allow one lawyer in a legal services organization in central Charlotte, North Carolina, to provide naturalization assistance to clients in a 40-mile radius where it would take people 3 hours to drive and get into downtown. So in thinking about how do we address distance and what was really interesting, and this will be the last one, and then I'll save the other slides for when we don't have anything to talk about. We took the model for Citizenship Works, assumed that there was lots of things that a person could do on their own, but at the end of the day, they needed to talk to a lawyer. So at the end of the day, they had to go in for an in-person service. When 2 years ago, this June, the Obama administration announced the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program in June 2 years ago and said, as of August 15th, less than 2 months from now, we're gonna have this brand new program. There's gonna be new applications that we haven't shown anybody yet and we haven't developed them yet. Young dreamers are gonna be eligible to apply. It was amazing to us that because of the work that had been done up to this point, people in the public interest legal community immediately said, oh my God, there's gotta be an online solution to this. There's gotta be something that is gonna help us. Can we take that Citizenship Works thing and do it for DACA? And the dreamers who were driving the legislative agendas and driving the political agenda said, hey, wait a second. Our families have been being, misused by lawyers for years, not being helped adequately. We want a system, and we're gonna need lawyers to help us, but we want a system that is gonna be self-service so that if we wanna do it ourselves, we can do it ourselves. And so Own the Dream is in fact a self-help service. If somebody gets through all of the red flag checkers and the logic, they can do it themselves. And it's been an incredibly, in thinking about what the, and as we've, since this rolled out mobile apps around these tools and texting campaigns that support both people understanding what their rights are and how to get access to services on the one hand, and then the youth dreamer networks promoting their advocacy agendas through to the same audiences that we have been able to bring together. I think going back to this legal empowerment question and thinking about what is the purpose of law in a society, if not ensuring justice. Really thinking about where are the opportunities, not just to be more efficient in our outreach and get more people in to use our stuff, but in thinking about embedding the access services that we provide in organizations that are present in communities all the days of the week that lawyers aren't there. how can we, in the moment of providing service, also connect people to those, if I knew how to jump the slide back, I'd do it really quickly, all of those organizations and institutions in their communities that could actually help deliver on their lived experience of justice in their lives, whether it's low-wage worker organizing, housing advocacy groups, groups that organize around access to benefits, all of those different things that would help maintain people's livelihood and support. Because the last thing, and then I'm not going to talk when they ask questions. The last thing is, I love the Shake Law people. I saw them at reInvent, got in touch with them, love what they're doing. I love the tiny law. But what's sort of not so funny about that notion is that in the people's courts, within the view of the legal system of what tiny law is, people lose their homes, their families get broken up, and they get deported every day. That's tiny law.
All right, let's have a... We're going to hold the questions until after all of our panelists have spoken, and that's a segue into Wilneida, who is here from LawHelp. And
Great.
the clicker. Go.
Yep, I have a clicker and, all right, excellent. I'm Wilneida Negron, and I'm the program coordinator slash I look at technology innovations for LawHelp New York. And I'm probably going to tell you something that you're not used to hearing, and that's that I'm actually very excited and optimistic about the legal industry, and especially in regards to access to justice, because as we all know, necessity is the mother of all inventions. And due to all the limited funding that is happening through the state and the federal funding channels, along with a lot of what Mark said about a lot of the access to justice needs, there's a lot of creativity that's coming out, a lot of really interesting partnerships happening, whether it's law and doctors partnering up to do early legal interventions in hospitals, whether it's lawyers partnering up with graphic designers to make law easy to understand, for people to grasp, whether it's legal law partnering with technologists, which is a lot of what Mark does. There's a lot of partnerships that are being born out of this great need, and a lot of really amazing things coming out with very limited funding that you can only imagine if there was more money available, that how much more issues and concerns we would be able to address. So for LawHelp New York, I'm just going to talk very briefly about some of the things that we work on a very, very shoestring budget. And the LawHelp New York project director is actually sitting up there, but she's right on this picture. So in our job day to day, when we look at how we can use technology to make the law more accessible for people, there's essentially 3 different ways that we've noticed. One of them is that technology is an information source for people. So through partnering with Mark and other people at probono.net, we have a legal information website that's in English, and it's also available in Spanish. And then a lot of this is gonna sound repetitive, I'm sorry, but we also have a live help capability, which Mark talked about, and that's basically, I believe that we've even had Brooklyn Law School students that have volunteered as part of their hours that they have to do to man this live help operator, and it's really fascinating. I'm not a lawyer, and I've actually gone ahead and I've chatted with a few people, and it's very real, it's very raw. A lot of these people visit the website and they have very immediate needs, whether it's an eviction proceeding, that they're going to eviction hearing that week and they don't have a lawyer. What kind of resource, what kind of legal information can we connect them to? So We don't provide legal information. We only help people. There's a lot of information on the website, so we only kind of walk people through the steps of where they would be able to get that information, or maybe send them a link to a Know Your Rights resource. So that service is available in English and Spanish. We also, last year, we received, again, thinking about technology serving as an information source. Last year, there were almost 69,000 people that went to our website, and they used the website through a tablet or their phone, their smartphone. So we're actually developing a mobile version of the website to make it easier for people to maneuver and get to the information they need. And then we're just now working on a pilot project. It's an SMS text messaging. We're piloting it for 3 different counties in New York. And it's targeting immigrant women that are victims of domestic violence. And through this SMS text messaging campaign, they'll be able to dial in a certain number, a specific phone code, and be able to be linked to information. So it's technology's kind of driving the expectation that people have immediate needs, and instead of them going on Google, because I'm sure we all go on Google and we say, you know, you Google questions onto the search box, and I'm sure that people, and based on the search that I do of Google results, people do search for, I'm being evicted in Brooklyn, where do I go? And we don't necessarily want them to be Googling those things, although hopefully in the first page there'll be relevant results. But we do want to answer to that need for the expectation that technology is creating, that people want to be able to access the information they need fast, and they want it to be reliable, and they want it to be useful. So a lot of what we do with Live Help and with the SMS text messaging and the mobile phone is to try to answer that need that people have for fast information, especially when they're dealing again with immediate need and not having a lawyer that can guide them through the process. And then the second thing that technology does is that it's a communication tool, and it's a communication platform. And actually, some of my slides are out of order, so they won't link in completely. But one thing that we're trying to do now at LawHelp is that there's obviously a lot of data that's being made available through New York City and New York State. And we're exploring at how we can engage people with that data, how we can use it to empower a community, more than one person, and you'll talk more about that, I'm sure. And so we're tapping into data, and this is just a Google heat map that I did using 311 heating data of people that did heating complaints. And we had, through visualizing that data, we found out the neighborhoods that had the most heating complaints. And then I sent out a few emails and did some targeted just online outreach to community groups that work in those neighborhoods, and notified them that they may not have the resources to tap into this data, but just gave them the information. This is a visualization, a map that shows your neighborhood. There's a lot of heating complaints in this neighborhood. Here are some Know Your Rights resources from this website that you can give, that you can be proactive and give to your community. This is an ArcGIS using GIS visualization tool. This we're still working on, and it basically it's going to layer. These are the different broken down by county. It's the divorce rates broken down by county, and the darker counties are the ones with the highest rates of divorce. But in the legal aid community, that's actually, divorce is one of the most researched topics on our website. And as we all know, 2 years ago, it became easier to get a divorce in New York, but there's still it's a great need, and there's a lot of lack of resources. So that's just another way that we're using data that's out and available to just be more targeted with the content that we develop in the outreach. Then the other thing is that technology helps to create communities, and it helps to foster networks. And along with making the information easy to understand, we kind of have adopted, we've created a blog and have adopted a community service media model, which is we target social service organizations. So it's kind of, it's, you know, there's a lot of flashy news websites. Why can't information that's helpful for people try to adopt some of those elements, try to engage people in an interactive way and in an educative way, and in a way that people are used to, you know, going on any website. So this is actually a blog that we've just, we haven't fully launched it yet, but it's LawHelpNY, and it's hoping to engage social service organizations and people, low-income people in New York, to learn about their rights. You know, maybe you're not going to go to it every morning, but maybe it'll be interesting and appealing enough that you will be engaged to just be more interested in knowing what's going on in your community and what kind of resources and information are out there. And again, these are just infographics, another way to just kind of make the law easy to understand and more accessible for people. The last thing that I'll talk about is that we do a lot of social media work, so we're looking to learn about the way that people have legal discussions online and the way that our own network works. So we've used an open source software called NodeXL. It's free and available for anybody to use. And we're kind of following certain hashtags. We're just kind of analyzing what kind of community clusters around certain discussions, who is actively seeking this information, who is participating in it, and what kind of communities are being built around these specific online discussions that we can, and how can that inform the work that we do at LawHelp as well. So looking at a lot of what's happening on social media is important. And we've taken all of this information in hopes of making it easy to understand for legal aid offices. We've created toolkits that kind of take a lot of this information and just impart it in a easy to digest manner so that all the lessons that we've learned, we can pass it on to other programs. So I'll just pass it on to for you to talk about.
Great, thank you, Wilneida. And our last speaker is Nikki Zeichner, who's the founder of the Parole Hearing Data Project.
Great. That sounds so established. So my name's Nikki Zeichner. I'm an attorney. I was practicing as a defense attorney here in New York for several years before having a wonderful opportunity to study integrated digital media at NYU's engineering school, which is right around the corner. And so this is a project that I began while I was kind of in transition. I was taking a course with a woman named Beth Novak, who's speaking later this afternoon, who's a huge advocate for open data projects. And at the same time, I was also involved in representing a man who was appearing in front of the parole board who had been denied 9 times beforehand. So he was eligible since '96, and this was just this past fall, he was still in prison. So during that time, I was kind of I had a foot in both places, in kind of technology and open data, and also creating a project for this class. And I was also working with this man and becoming passionate about his case. So I developed this project, which here's an educational tool for criminal justice research built on examining parole hearing data. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, and hopefully this will work. I'm just going to click forward. Okay, so hopefully this will work. This is a video of the woman who introduced me to this case that I ended up getting tangled in. So do I just hit, or do you? Is he?
And every time that he comes up for the hearing, he gets the identical answer. Now, I have written the governor, I have written the mayor, I have written all kinds of people about his case. I've really given up now because I've been doing this for years and it hasn't worked. And he comes up, and each time they turn him down and they say these words. And every time that he comes up for the hearing, he gets the identical answer. Now I have written the governor. I've really given up now because I've been doing it for years and it hasn't worked. And he comes up, and each time they turn him down and they say these words, the nature of the crime. That's all the explanation we get, whatever that means.
So I don't know if that was audible to everybody, but basically I wanted to show this just because it's amidst all of this conversation about technology, that this is like the person behind it who inspired the project. And you know, really most of these projects are about human beings. So, but what she was talking about was just the nature of the crime, that you know, there wasn't really much explanation to the determination that was made. It was just all we hear is the nature of the crime. 30 years ago, some crime happened, and due to that, we're denying you continually every year. So what I ended up focusing on was just, I put this picture, but like opacity, right? Like there's no transparency here. And parole is a different issue from the civil legal services that we've just heard about, in that there really aren't any rights. You know, so like know your rights trainings for people to go litigate in court if they're getting evicted, or you know, to obtain a divorce. There is actually a legal process there, and I mean, it's kind of bold to say, but it kind of is not. There's kind of not a legal process for parole hearings. It's like completely based on sentiment. There's really no entitlement for release, even if you're eligible. So what I was interested in was just finding out what's going on. So let's see what I have here. Okay, so this I'll show you. I'll show you just a visualization based on a scrape that I created with a lot of help from the director of my program, Luc Dubois, who's a data artist. So what I ended up doing was I went on the Parole Board's website. Since I've been practicing, I kind of knew about the resources. So there's this interview schedule where they post all of the upcoming hearings for the next 6 months and in the past 2 years. So you can see, you know, all the records of the guys and women who are appearing. They say the facility where they're housed, you know, the date of the hearing, demographic information like race, age, things like this. So I scraped it all, and you know, I started building a data set and cleaning a data set, which is a really enormous task because the data is super messy, but creating a way for people to start understanding the system. And then, you know, when we understand it, because we don't have a legal system to govern what happens with parole so much, at least we can work with public sentiment and realize, okay, are these decisions completely contrary to what we believe the public interest is, or do we believe that they're reasonable? So, so that's kind of where I started. And the scrape, I'm going to try to run this. It's just a video, but of the scrape that there is. It's just invisible. But if you put it, yeah. So basically, this is the scrape running. So and it's hard to understand it, but these little numbers are age. And when the scrape is being run, I think it's paused right now. When the scrape is being run, the bar graph kind of grows per each record from the parole interview schedule from the Parole Board's website. So on the left, I guess this is my right, your left-hand side is by race, and then here is by age. So from this first visualization, we started to realize that there was this spike in people who were appearing in front of the Parole Board at around like age 48 or so. And that was like a really interesting thing to learn. It kind of made sense, right? Like a lot of people who are in for violent crimes are serving sentences of like 15 to 25 years to life. So, you know, 48 minus 25, let's say, is around 23. That makes sense. That's when a lot of people get in for violent crimes, which are the types of crimes that end up in front of the Parole Board. So this is like really valuable information. We can kind of make assumptions about older people and whether they are dangerous to society. How does that maybe impact the arguments we can make for somebody's release in the future? And what I ended up realizing also is that looking at parole data could be enormously helpful for all criminal justice research, because you're really getting a story after a whole period of incarceration. So we can learn things about how certain facilities are impacting somebody through time and whether it actually prepares somebody for release, or we can learn a lot just beyond parole. So it's a really exciting thing. And I just wanted to mention briefly that Wilneida was talking about using data to then go back into the community and realize where the work needs to be done. So one thing that I really would love to do beyond scraping, scraping helps us kind of move forward with this idea of who's watching the watchmen, right? Like, let's hold these systems that govern us accountable. But then also, I want to implement other ways to get people to participate who have firsthand experience with the system, so that we can get maybe crowdsource hearing transcripts, so we can also get their narratives in to help define this issue, because scraping data is really only pulling data that the government's provided you with. So they're kind of defining it to some degree, and participation is a really big part of that as well. So.
Great, thank you, Nikki. Jonathan, how much time are you going to give us?
We're running a little bit late, but we're okay. We can push everything back just a little bit. So time for a couple questions and from the audience.
Yeah, and I want to allow the audience to take some time and leap in here. There's one question I want to ask at the outset. There's a tendency to view legal problems that are unaddressed as low level. We talked about that this morning. The kind of things that are suitable for what you might describe as the one-size-fits-all solution. But each of you have talked about the fact that many of these problems are in fact fairly complex. They involve discretionary decision-making, highly discretionary decision-making, where a one-size-fits-all approach simply won't work. Immigration law also simply doesn't match this paradigm of something you can get a form for. So I'm wondering if all of you would reflect on the difficulties of using technology, which works very well for mass-produced solutions, in a context in which many of these real-life unaddressed access to justice problems can't really be resolved through a one-size-fits-all methodology.
I think we should.
So, in the immigration context, the opportunity that I see is to use the technology to better enable lawyers to be available to handle in the medical profession, the public health profession, where they talk about getting doctors to practice at the top of their license rather than, Judge Littman here in New York. He uses this image when he talks about state court. He says state courts are the emergency room for the social ills of the 21st century. The first time he said that, I thought, oh, that's really good. It's not a biblical quote, finally. No, but then I heard him say it several more times, and I thought about it some more, and I thought, well, okay, an emergency room medical practices aren't what we maybe want to aspire to, but why? I had teenage kids at the time, and I spent a lot of time in emergency rooms, and we spent very little time with doctors. We spent time with people who, because of established protocols and the intelligent use of technology, were able to assess and triage and make sure that the doctor was spending time on the issues the doctor needs to be spending time on. So similarly, with the example that I was showing about the remote video consultation where a lawyer can't be in all those different places, how can the technology be used to allow sort of non-lawyer participants in justice networks do more of the work to gather and tee up so that the lawyers can actually spend time dealing with the more complex issues?
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just think that computers save time. You know, I mean, you can just you can make things less complex, or at least a lot of the work less complex with technology.
Let me ask one other general question before I open it up to the audience, and that is where you see the principal problems in expanding technology, these labor-saving efficiency mechanisms, so as to address unmet legal needs. Where are the roadblocks and how can we resolve them?
I have one thing to say, which is lawyers. I think lawyers are a roadblock. I think that, like, I've found when I've tried to approach this idea of crowdsourcing legal documents, something that I'm really fascinated with, because I think, like, transcripts of legal hearings are rich sources of really, really vital information. I get a lot of pushback from attorneys, and I believe that it's for a few reasons. I think one is just complete lack of understanding of what would be done. So, like, they just don't understand the idea necessarily of working with data in this way. It's just not part of their practice, you know. They have a lot of responsibilities, and they're just different ones. So kind of there's this understanding gap that makes it difficult for lawyers to be able to trust technology, especially when they have the responsibility of, you know, keeping and protecting their clients. So I think that's like one huge roadblock. And what else did I have to? Oh, and then, you know, and then it's also self-preservation, right? You know, like, lawyers kind of have an incentive to disservice their clients in that respect and just keep protecting themselves, and, you know, first and foremost before putting information out there. So
I was gonna just quickly say two other roadblocks. I would say it's definitely sustainability. A lot of these projects that have an impact, they receive just limited funding. So even if for 6 months we're able to prove that we've reached thousands of people, that doesn't mean that we'll be able to do it next year. So sustainability of these technology projects are really important, and the funding is still limited. And the other one is managing expectations of people, the client end. And the more accessible that you make yourself, and the easier that you make it for them to also, you know, chat with, post a comment on one of the blogs or send us an email, also sometimes gives them the impression that they will be able to get advice from or assistance very rapidly. So I think a lot of times we just have to manage people's expectations that access doesn't necessarily mean that, and kind of going back to what Mark said at the beginning, doesn't mean that you're going to get a lawyer through going on the website necessarily, or that I'm going to be able to email you legal information. It means that I can only supply you with the tools and with the information so that you're just better informed. So it's kind of, for the meantime, it would be great to do more stuff, but it's good to just kind of manage people's expectations about the technology. And I don't know if you have anything else, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, well, the legal system is not a neutral space, is another one of the barriers to it, and there are different institutional interests. I mean, it is fantastic that the courts here in New York State have been championing the cause of civil legal services, have been championing access to justice. A huge amount of work that's been done that's really great, but we also need to look and kind of go, well, wait a second, you know, what does it mean when the courts actually are administering and setting up programs to provide assistance, and what's driving, you know, what success is, you know, what success is from the point of view of making the administration of justice more efficient, which will improve access to justice regardless of the outcome in any individual case, is very different than the perspective of an advocate who, you know, in this. So you know, and it, you know, it is, as Wilneida was saying, a lot of it has to do with just resources. I mean, it's just almost laughable, the amount of funding that goes into, beyond funding civil legal services in this country, but going into funding technology and innovation is actually extraordinary. The Legal Services Corporation set up an independent funding stream about 10 or 11 years ago, the Technology Innovations Grants Program, that at its height gave out, I don't know, $6.5 million a year. Now it gives out, like $2.5 million a year. The return on investment that they've gotten for that money, in terms of proving how a little bit of funding can really incentivize people to think differently, is extraordinary. But in terms of the magnitude of the problem, we're just in early days, the work that we're doing.
So the problems are high expectations from clients, the lawyers are in the way, and there's not enough money. Those are big problems to solve. Let me open it up to all of you for comments, questions, etc.
Hi, I'm Leah Margulies. I'm the project director of LawHelp New York, and I also want to say I'm a Brooklyn Law School graduate, so it's really delightful to be here. What Mark and Wilneida didn't actually say is the scope of the problem, and I think people really don't understand it. Last year, 3.2 million people in New York State went to civil court without an attorney. And what that means for somebody who's about to lose their home or their children, it's extraordinary. So I'm just urging people to get involved. Now you have pro bono credit requirements. Our Live Help program engages 125 law students from around New York State, mostly New York City, not that many from Brooklyn Law School, each year in providing pro bono services through Live Help. Most of them are coming from Columbia and Truro, and I always wonder, why aren't they coming from Brooklyn Law School? So this is a challenge. Please join us in this. We also do an enormous amount of social media, and we had about 90,000 people visited our social media related to Sandy resources. So
in defense of Brooklyn Law School, I think perhaps we've got 31 clinics, more clinics than any other school in the country, I believe, and I think they're probably working on some other issues, but certainly we should
I told you it was contested terrain.
Certainly one problem we can at least work on.
First of all, I want to commend all of you for the work you're doing. It makes you feel proud to be a lawyer or to be involved with that. So something that was just addressed, all of you are doing consumer-facing work. To what extent are you using technology, social media, and other tools to make consumers aware of what you're doing? Because I think that, I think part of the problem that you have is there's not enough people aware of the resources that you're making available to them. And doing a simple Google search is not necessarily going to enable them to find out what you're doing and what the availability of your services are.
Yeah, outreach is a big part of these initiatives. Actually, happily, if you do search for most common, legal problems in New York, you will get Law Help up pretty high on that first page, which is a good thing. We've also used Google Grants and other things to, essentially be able to place Law Help high up in there. But, when we first proposed doing Law Help here in New York, we had two reactions from legal aid lawyers who were skeptical about it. One said, my clients will never use the web. And the second said, there are more people finding our office today that we have to turn away. Why would we ever want to let anybody else know how to find us? And in fact, both of those things were true. And it wasn't until we engaged in doing this work and were actually able to, show that these tools would allow them to do more and make different kinds of services available, and that in fact, access to online information was changing. But a lot of the outreach strategies has been involved around what are the other brick and mortar access points to low-income people finding help. So a lot of work has been done in partnerships with libraries like the the Citizenship Works things, and what are other community institutions, constituent services offices of city councilmen love these things. They're making sure that awareness is high in settlement houses, and is a more is sort of unparalleled to sort of buying AdWords and mass marketing of these efforts. Really been the strategies that folks have done. In Montana, they did a fabulous thing. I love this. I'm waiting for somebody else to replicate this. They did a series of common legal advice coasters that went into bars. But I haven't seen anybody else do that yet. They seem to be more interested in subway ads.
Great. All right. I think we're running late, so I'd like us to all head up to the lunch workshop. Now, this is an experiment. I don't know if this will succeed or fail, but this is an effort at crowdsourcing civic participation. Depending on how many people we have in the room and how many people grab the mic, we are going to try to create the Citizens Charter for cyberspace. So I'll see you upstairs. Elevators, best elevator. Well, there's elevators here.
And before you go, a round of applause for our panelists.
Thanks. There are 2 elevator banks. There's elevators here. If you take them to 9, you'll have to walk around and then go up another flight of stairs. And there's another elevator. What? You could just take stairs, sure.
I know. Yeah, the director tried to fix this, but I never realized really great color.
Huge numbers. We have almost nobody who doesn't. And they tend to be very active. I mean, they're all doing 62 different things. They all have their clinics. Sometimes they have an externship. But I mean, what you're doing is fabulous experience. I don't know. It was still surprised it was.
It's that somebody, yeah. I mean, it's everybody that has every that's done it has always reported back just really impacted by just being able to connect. This is something